Morning. It is 6:55 on Saturday morning. I am waiting for the Y to open at 7. This morning I weighed in at 168, which means I'm down from my highest about 100 pounds. So I figured in today's video I would go over how I lost that 100 pounds. But first things first, I have a warm-up walk. I'm going to hit back, and then I'm signed up for a spin session, which is an hour long. I am not looking forward to that, but it will be a good workout. Workout complete. It feels good to get that done early in the day on a Saturday. So like I said, I'm down about 100 pounds from my all-time high. The first 40 pounds took me years, like almost 10 years. Every year would be kind of the same cycle. In the spring, I would get super motivated. Usually we'd have a vacation planned for like late May. So I'd be super motivated to lose weight. I would hit some diet that would be really extreme. Usually I would do intermittent fasting where like early in the week, I would do one meal a day. I would skip breakfast, skip lunch, and just have as small of a dinner as I could. And I would usually do that Monday and Tuesday, sometimes Wednesday. And then as the week went on, I would be less and less strict on the diet. And each year I would lose somewhere between 10 to maybe 15 pounds by the time summer would roll around. And then I would lose motivation. I would still be dieting, but I would stop losing weight and I would more just maintain. I would be very active during the summer, but my diet would slip. You know, there's grill outs, there's fun stuff, there's my birthday in July. So I would usually just kind of maintain weight throughout the summer. I would try to lose weight, but be unsuccessful every week, telling myself the next week was going to be I would get back to it, but never would. Then fall would roll around, and all of a sudden it's hoodie season and it's the holidays, and I would completely give up on the diet, and I would usually gain some of the weight back. Sometimes only 5 pounds, sometimes I would gain everything back, and sometimes a little bit more. So then that would continue all the way through Christmas and, the Super Bowl. And then right around then, end of February, beginning March, start the cycle over. Get all motivated, start crazy crash dieting. And that's what I did from about, 2015 to 2025, which brings me to the next phase. All right, just finished a 4-mile run, so I figured now I'll talk about the next phase, which started in October of 2025. That's when I started losing the last 50 pounds or so. I started at 225 pounds, and I'm sure the most common question will be if I started using a GLP-1, and the answer to that is yes. I started using tirzepatide, also known as Zepbound. And I'm gonna get into that and kind of explain my thoughts on it. But first I wanted to get into what actually lost the weight, which was diet and exercise. So I'll go over those first in order of importance, obviously the first being diet. So what I did was I started tracking all of my calories. I use the app Lose It. I set my goal to 1,700 calories, which is pretty aggressive. I was paying out of pocket, or I am paying out of pocket for Zepbound. So I wanted to push the weight loss kind of to the limits of what's healthy, which is about 2 pounds a week. And 1,700 calories is on the low end, but that was my goal. I very rarely actually kept it under 1,700 calories. I usually went over by maybe 50 or 100. And then sometimes, on the weekends going out to eat, I might go over by a couple hundred calories, but I always tracked everything. And I think tracking is extremely important for anyone trying to lose weight. Most people don't realize portion sizes and how big a portion actually is. So when you look at the calories on something, you'll probably just kind of guess that you're eating about 1 serving, when that's almost never the case. I wanted to show a couple examples. I want to show a couple examples of food that you might be tracking without weighing and see just how off you might be if you're just eyeballing it. The first example is peanut butter, which is a pretty common one. You can see the serving size is 2 tablespoons, but actually 32 grams. So to weigh it, we'll just zero out the scale, go to grams, and I think what most people will do is just get a big heaping thing and say, well, that's probably about 2. When in reality, that's 55. That's almost, twice as much. So now I'll put back on until we hit a real serving. And there is a real serving, just over 34 instead of 32. Another example is cereal. The common serving size will say 1 cup, but it actually is 41 grams. So I know personally when I would do it, I would think, well, a cup, and if I'm pouring it into this bowl, it might be a little bit more than a cup, but it's got to be pretty close. When in reality, if you fill it up to about there, not even full, that's 58 grams. Again, almost double. And each one of those mistakes might be not that big of a deal. You're talking maybe 100, 150 calories. But if your deficit is only 500 for the day, 2 or 3 of those mistakes will eat away at your deficit, and all of a sudden you're not losing weight at all. And don't get me wrong, I know tracking sucks, but I think it's very important to do it at least for a few weeks when you start a diet to familiarize yourself with some of your common foods and what the serving sizes are. If you did the same thing for your budget and told people that you were trying to save money, but were having no success, you were, at the end of the month, you were left with no money to put into savings, and someone asked, well, how much do you make in a month? How much do you spend on rent or your mortgage? How much do you spend on groceries? And if you said, well, I don't really track that, but I know for sure that I'm spending less than I make, you would look at them like they're crazy. Like, obviously you're not. If you're not ending the month with money to put into your savings account, you are spending more than you should be. So you need to start tracking it. And that brings me to what I've been doing for exercise. When it comes to losing weight, I think that exercise is a small drop in the bucket compared to diet, but it's still important. So what I typically do in a day is I will warm up with a mile walk, then I will lift for 15 to 20 minutes, and then I usually do a 3-mile run. I know that that's a lot more than most people do, but I'm doing that because I'm also training for, right now I'm training for a triathlon in August, but I ran a half marathon this spring. I will be running a full marathon this fall, and I like to train for those types of things, but I'm doing that for the fun of it, not because I think it makes a big difference in weight loss. Now I want to talk about GLP-1 usage and my thoughts on it. I think it's an absolute game changer. As someone who used to always think about food, it is fantastic to not have that constant, food noise throughout the day, especially when you've already eaten and you are thinking, I shouldn't be thinking about food at this point. I just ate. I know there is a stigma around it, and I get the feeling that some people think it's cheating. I would agree. I think it's absolutely cheating. But when it comes to weight loss and your health, this isn't a competition that you're playing with other people. This is all about, you reaching your goals. And if you can cheat, I think you should do it, which is why I'm doing it. And if someone, judges you for that, I think that speaks to their insecurities more than what you're doing. As far as the concerns, I think, in my research, most of the health concerns came down to people who used GLP-1s and didn't eat a healthy diet because of that. So there's still some personal responsibility that when you're taking the medication and you have a suppressed appetite, that you still eat a healthy diet. And I get that most people who take the medication were overweight and didn't have a healthy diet to begin with. But I don't think that's the drug's fault. I think that is just kind of the nature of our society. As far as what will happen when I go off of the medication, I don't really know what will happen. Right now I have 7 doses left, and that's going to be the last doses that I ever take. I'm not going to be on this medication forever. Soon I will be tapering off. So I have 7 doses, which would last 7 weeks, but I'm going to let the last 4 kind of space out. So I'll probably be on the medication for another 3 months, and we'll see how bad the hunger is, how bad the weight gain is. My plan is to continue to track my food, continue working out like I am, continue weighing myself, and see where that takes me. So if you're curious what will happen, just continue to watch these videos. If there are any other questions that you have for me, either as someone who is taking Zepbound or just my thoughts on GLP-1 usage in general, you can leave them in the comments. I will respond. But I think that brings us to a physique check. This is where I currently am. Can you see abs? I feel like there might be the start of abs. You say yes. I swear on God's good green flat earth, you say yes.